Right. So, hi, I'm Giancarlo. I've been coming to codebar for quite a while, but this is my first time doing a talk of any sort, so bear with me if I'm incoherent. But today I'm going to be presenting a more of a technical discussion. It's just a quick chat about how to make the terminal work for you and not the other way around. Because I think if you've used the terminal, you will notice that it is not user-friendly. It is not the easiest thing to when you're working with it, sometimes it just doesn't help you at all, and you end up working more for doing one simple thing instead of having the terminal work for you. So I decided to kind of collate some different tips that you could do to, make your life a little bit easier. And you might already use them. So here are some of the problems that we commonly have when we're working. So one of them is, what's that command again? There's a command you might use once every so often and you've forgotten it and you need to cut it back. For me, it's actually the one to change my shell, which is something I'll get into in a bit. I always forget what the command is. The git branch, I always forget what git branch I'm on. I always forget what directory I'm in. And if you use, for example, a Mac, that's just a standard Mac without any kind of terminal modification, none of this information is given to you. But it can be, and that's why I'm here to talk about it, because you can change that. We can kind of theme our terminal in a certain way, we can add plugins, we can create custom functions, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. So that's why I felt it was a good idea to kind of open our eyes and see what else we can do. So, the solution, you have three different options. The first one is the easiest, it's to change your terminal application, and I'll talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. Next is to change your shell language, which is a little bit more complicated, but actually isn't as bad as it sounds. I know it sounds a bit technical. The third is to customize your shell, which is a bit technical, but if you write, for example, JavaScript, you probably would be able to do this and you wouldn't have too much of a problem, I think. But if you do, you can look it up online. There's lots of resources online to customize your shell in a certain way. So let's start with the basics. Changing your terminal application, this is as easy as downloading one online. I've tried to list a bunch of different ones for different OSs. I use Mac OS, so the one that is the gold standard that everyone seems to be using is iTerm 2. It's very, very, very similar to what the normal one is for Mac. This is the terminal app that comes with Mac OS, but it's just a bit better. It just has more features that you'd want. It's just nicer. I have never used CMDER, I think it's CMDER or CMDER, I don't know, and Tilde, because I don't use those two OSs. Hyper is a really cool one if you're using Mac OS or Windows or Linux, because it is cross-platform and it's built with JavaScript, which is kind of cool. It's very pretty. It's a very aesthetically pleasing terminal. So if you want to have something that's a bit easier on your eyes, kind of like how your text editor has really nice fonts and things, Hyper is cool. Also really recommend you check out, if you use a text editor that has a terminal, to check it out. VS Code is really good, and VS Code has a lot of features, for example, that integrate with that terminal. For example, if you want to debug a JavaScript application or a Node application, you can use VS Code and it'll run in the terminal inside VS Code, so you don't have to kind of flip back and forth, it's just on the bottom. And same thing with running tests. It's a really, really nice idea to kind of have it all contained, because you can concentrate more. So worth checking some of these out instead of using the regular ones. And also just a heads up, I'll post this online somewhere. This is already online, but I'll post it so that you can click these links if you want to find out later more about terminal if you're really interested, and then you can download one of these and try it out. Next thing is to change your style language. So Mac OS and Linux, we use one called Bash. That's the default one that comes when you start up your computer for the first time. The terminal will run this language called Bash. Windows uses something else, but now it has Bash emulation, so you can basically use Bash in Windows as well, which is great, because that was a big problem. But you don't have to use Bash. So Bash is like the standard, but you have options. Some of them are more complicated, but there's a few that are quite nice, and they kind of build upon Bash, and they're actually, they allow you to do more stuff. So ZSH is the first one. I actually used to pronounce this zish until today, and then people were talking about it. I was like, oh, that's not how you say that, but I never talked about it to anyone before. So it's ZSH. This is kind of like an extension of Bash, which is really good, and I'll explain why in a bit. It just has more functionality. So for example, if you were to be typing in a command that you've typed in before, it'll kind of auto-complete it for you. Or you can press tab on commands, and you can kind of see a list of available commands or directories if you're changing directories, or if you're running npm commands from package.json, it'll find all the different options and it'll list them for you. So there's all these little shortcuts that come with ZSH that to get in bash, either you'd have to do a bit of work yourself or isn't there. So you can also theme it, you can make custom colors, you can add plugins, it's really great. And you can also add custom prompts as well to show your directory. Fish is the one that I'm currently using. It is the Friendly Interactive Shell, that's what it stands for. It's something, their logo, their slogan's like the shell that's made for the 90s, which is kind of funny. I really like this. It has like highlighting. I wish I could show you, but my computer's not here. But I would just say try it out yourself. It is really great. It has autocomplete. It has highlighting. It highlights words as you type. You can press tab on almost any command that you're typing in, and it auto gives you a list that you can select from. It's really, it makes life so much faster. That's the one thing. It's like you never have to kind of figure out what you're doing. You always have it auto-completing for you, and it remembers commands from ages ago. It's a little bit different from ZSH because the language it uses, the shell language, is not quite the same. So when we get to the next part, I'll explain why that can be a bit more of a hassle, but it's worth it in the end. And also it has its own set of plugins and prompts, so you can customize it to your heart's content and make it the way you like. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about is customizing your shell, and that is getting into the nitty-gritty. You can actually add customizations to your shell using either bashrc, zshrc, or config.fish. So you would find this file. It's usually in your etc folder. Depends on the shell, but you basically edit it. And these are written in languages, the shell language. So bashrc is written in bash, zshrc is written in zsh. And essentially what you do is you can add different kind of extensions. So one of them that I use a lot is an alias. An alias is essentially a shortcut, right? Just kind of how you have a shortcut on your desktop to go to a certain page or a certain file or something. You can do the same thing in your terminal. And I had no idea. So if you write, I type npm, I would be typing npm run dev like a million times a day because that's the command to start, my dev server. But I could just type dev. And then that way, every time I type dev, the terminal automatically runs npm run dev. Or I could do git commit, and I could do the same thing. So these are just little, you could just add little shortcuts. If you type something quite a lot that has more than one word, you can just shorten it to something really simple, and then you could just type it faster. Second thing is a function, which is similar to an alias, but it takes an argument or a parameter, or more than one parameter. So the example I have here is commit with a message. So you could write commit with message, hi codebar, and then it would do that. I had an example running, but it's okay, it's on my computer. I can show you later if you really want. So this is like an extension of the alias. And this is really handy for more complex things. So for example, I have a function that I found a version in bash online, but I extended it, I kind of translated it to the fish RC language, or the fish language, which basically checks for branches in my local repository that don't exist on my origin, or the repository on the server. And if they're not on the server, it means that they can be safely deleted, and I can delete them all. So it does that all automatically, so I don't have to sit there and delete branches, like typing in, I just have a function that does it all for me. So that's the kind of use you can have for functions. Again, it might be a bit much now, but you can find all sorts of things online that help you write functions and that you might find useful. Maybe there's ones that I find useful that I haven't found yet, but there are a lot of resources online for these types of things. And finally, themes, plugins, and prompts, that's the fun part. Kara was telling me how they basically spent a day customizing their ZSH terminal, so you could get really stuck in if you want. For Oh My ZSH is the one for ZSH. That's a really popular one. It's the installation as well. It's handling everything, so you could basically install it. You can add themes. You can customize those themes. You can add prompts. Fisherman or Tacklebox are two options for fish. They're kind of both running in parallel. Like, they both do the same sort of thing, but they have different options for themes and plugins and stuff, so they're both worth checking out. And that's it. Oh, sorry, I was overwhelmed by the terminal, but yeah, thanks a lot. If you want to have a look at the slides and check out all the links that I posted, the link is there. This presentation is just online there, and Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks a lot.